Thank you so much for coming to our lunchtime seminar today, launching the report of Navigating Homelessness, Challenges Faced by Survivors of Modern Slavery. This piece of research was conducted by the incredible homelessness charity, The Passage, and was funded by us, the Modern Slavery Human Rights Policy and Evidence Centre at the University of Oxford. My name is Rose Fatherazi, and I'm the Research Associate here at the PEC, and just giving some of the intros. Now, today's format is a little different from our previous seminars. We will hear opening remarks from the CEO of The Passage, Mick Clark, followed by a presentation by the researcher of this project, Dr. Julia Thomas. But there will also be a Q&A between Julia and an expert by experience, Mila Mihailov, before we open questions up to the floor. To provide a quick summary of this important piece of research, the project set out to explore housing challenges faced by survivors who only receive outreach support under the Modern Slavery Victim Care Contract, with a particular focus on the structural, legal, and practical barriers that contribute to housing insecurity. By investigating these challenges, the report and the subsequent summary aims to inform policy and practice by highlighting examples of good practice and by proposing actionable recommendations for improving housing outcomes for survivors. There's also a supplementary policy brief which especially focuses on the barriers to housing for those who do not enter the NRM and provides a series of recommendations on potential reforms on addressing this gap. So thank you for your attention as I waffled on, but I will now happily hand over to the CEO of The Passage, Mick Clark, for the formal opening remarks.
Thanks very much, Rose, and let me add my welcome to the launch of Navigating Homelessness. As Rose says, research that shines a light on the housing barriers faced by survivors while they receive support under the NRM. As Rose said, my name is Mick Clark. I'm the Chief Executive of The Passage, and The Passage is an organisation that works to prevent and end homelessness, and for many years has been working at an operational but also strategic level on the link between homelessness and modern slavery. Before I go any further with just some opening remarks, my deep thanks to all of you for attending. It's fantastic to keep hearing the pings as more people come in. And my thanks to our partners, MS Spec and the University of Oxford, who've been absolutely brilliant in helping us with this research. So for me, why does this issue matter? Well, firstly, safe housing is fundamental to recovery, to safety and long-term stability. Secondly, too many survivors experience housing instability and even sometimes homelessness whilst they're in the NRM. And finally, this report helps us to understand how the structural reasons behind this can be explored and looked at. The report gives some key insights to how survivors face systemic and structural barriers to housing, how housing pathways are often really fragmented, inconsistent, and can be terribly difficult to navigate, and also how systems are rarely designed with survivor needs in mind, increasingly leading to more trauma and more risk. And this report takes evidence from the front line, gives a voice to survivors, and highlights and encourages cross-sector expertise. It also connects homelessness and modern slavery, a link that, as Rose said, is often overlooked and something that The Passage was the first to highlight many years ago in the UK, and we're increasingly doing more work at an international level on this issue too. And it's been greatly strengthened, I think, by our partnership working with MS Spec. So what do I want you to take away from the room today? Well, firstly, that housing is central to any meaningful anti-slavery strategy. Secondly, that no single sector can resolve this. Collaboration is essential. And as in everything, we achieve so much more when we work together rather than in isolation. Thirdly, that survivors really shouldn't be left navigating complex systems alone. And finally, that there is a shared responsibility for all of us to redesign safer and more accessible pathways. So just before handing over to the report's author, Dr. Julia Thomas, who is based at The Passage, I'd also like to thank Mila, who you will also hear from, who, in my view, has really brought invaluable lived experience to this report and has shared her invaluable insights into the human reality behind the data, sometimes a point that we can easily miss. And also for me, also really demonstrates what could be achieved if survivor expertise really did guide system reform. So thank you again so much for attending. I'm now going to hand over to Dr. Julia to give an overview of the report. Thank you. Julia.
Thank you, Mick. Thank you so much, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this event. Without further ado, I'm going to start immediately with some survivor voices. And I leave the safe house because I was pregnant and it wasn't suitable for a mother and a baby. They moved me to an asylum hotel and I stayed there for a few weeks before having an emergency cesarean. This lady had an emergency cesarean because of the stress caused of moving into an asylum hotel. The second quote, I just want somewhere where I can have peace, even if it's an empty space. And I want us to think about this quote. And why are we doing this research? Because survivors are still facing housing instability, even under government protection and support. So this research, it's not about individual failings. It's not about the Home Office or particular charities' failings. No, what we really wanted to achieve here is to examine the structural reasons why the system is not working for survivors who are actually under government support. So I used a framework to analyze the housing barriers faced by survivors. This framework doesn't come from me, it comes from the Australian Red Cross. Really, really beautiful, useful report. It's in our references. I advise you to read it as well. We have 4 dimensions here, 4 barriers: availability, accessibility, eligibility, and suitability. Availability. When we apply this framework into the UK system, we understood that there are clear bed shortages in London. Many survivors who are offered a safe house want to stay in London because it's where their community is. But however, there's not enough beds and safe houses in London, we are told. There is a lack on the other side. There is a lack of specialist provision in some regions. Some regions in the UK don't have any specialist provision. So you can really see that availability is a disparity. It's a lottery ticket. We then have accessibility, not only because of the geographic dislocation that I just talked about, but also regarding disability access. There's, to my knowledge, none, maybe one, but to my knowledge, none safe houses that are accessible to wheelchairs, for instance. Then there's the matter of eligibility, which is very concerning as well. People are deemed not eligible to go to a safe house because of their immigration status. If a person is seeking asylum, they will put automatically in an asylum hotel. If a person has housing entitlements, they are told that they are not entitled to safe houses. They should turn themselves to the local, not turn themselves, go to local authorities and do housing applications. I will develop a little bit this, because I know many of you, this is very arguable. Anyway, we also have the question of eligibility at local authority level, priority need criteria, which survivors do not meet this criteria. And then finally, the 4th dimension is suitability. We are all well aware that asylum hotels are not trauma-informed environments for survivors of modern slavery. But on the other side, many survivors told me they actually did not like their experience in the safe houses because they don't have any autonomy. They have to say when they arrive, when they leave. They can't share their addresses with their family, with their families, with their friends. And so they don't feel they are autonomous. They don't like that kind of control. And finally, cultural proximity. Actually, it seems that survivors seem to prefer to let down housing, a safe housing, to be in the cultural proximity, to be close to their support networks, to their communities. So what are the core insights after analyzing this framework? Well, clearly, instability and unsafe placements persist. Asylum hotels are not safe, are not stable. And then we have also hidden homelessness, staying with friends. Many survivors prefer to sofa surfing, even if they are staying with someone that they barely know, not to be apart from their support networks. A very key question in here at policy level is eligibility that is misapplied. Entitlements are misunderstood. We have two pieces of policy of guidance here. We're talking about the modern slavery statutory guidance, and we are confusing it. And I say we, general, we are confusing it quite often with the destitution assessment guidance. The destitution assessment guidance is before a person enters the NRM, before positive reasonable grounds decision. Then the contract holder will analyze if a person is destitute or not, and then they will provide access to a safe house before positive reasonable grounds decision. But and that is just before. The modern slavery victim care, the modern slavery statutory guidance clearly says that any survivor who is homeless or at risk of homelessness is entitled to a safe house. Now, this is not what we are seeing actually at all on the ground. People, practitioners and survivors are told, because you are a UK national, because you have housing entitlements, you are not entitled to government-funded safe house. You need to go to local authorities. This is just a matter of training. We see then fragmented local authority response. Referrals are passed from safeguarding to housing to police without resolution. Some local authorities are incredibly good in identifying and supporting survivors, and some are not. Again, lottery tickets. And we can really clearly see the difference of local authorities who have modern slavery coordinators. The support provided to survivors is much better. And finally, the last core insight, data and training gaps. And my friends and dear colleagues, I know for all of you who know me since these last years, it's been at least 8 years that the passage is asking for the same. We need the data. The Home Office holds is the data controlling of these of all the housing status of survivors when they enter the NRM. If they share that with local authorities, that will allow local authorities to better understand how many survivors, homeless or at risk of homelessness, are in their boroughs. And this will ease the allocation of resources. And then there's training gaps. Limited modern slavery knowledge in housing teams, which we will further discuss with my colleague and friend Mila. And so, what does this mean? Well, and this is arguable, but I think that housing is the weakest link in the NRM safety net. How do we expect survivors to recover when they have no housing status? And this instability also increases the risk of re-exploitation and the risk of re-traumatization, because survivors need to repeat on and on and on again their stories. And finally, basically, survivors are not simply recognized as a distinct housing group. So, some recommendations that we picked up for this. Well, first, we need to amend Chapter 25 of the Homelessness Code Guidance. And I must say, thanks to some methods that we used and co-production of our recommendations, this went far and beyond, and actually it is acknowledged in the Ministry of Housing plan, national plan to reduce homelessness. We also need to clarify the modern slavery victim care contract eligibility rules. Who has access to safe houses or not? This needs to be clearer. There's clearly a lack of clarity in here. We need to introduce modern slavery as a category on housing application forms. Note, last week I was told that some local authorities actually do have this, but this is not everywhere. So this should be the same across the country. We should publish housing status data for survivors. This will help boroughs. This will help local authorities, local housing authorities. This will allow us to understand clearly the intersection between modern slavery and homelessness. We need to standardize and evaluate the training we are delivering. My amazing colleagues from Anti-Slavery International and others are agreed on a framework of training for local authorities. This is starting to be implemented in some regions of the UK. However, it's not at national level yet. We are not yet there. And therefore, we cannot evaluate it at the national level, which I won't absolutely have no doubt. Anti-Slavery International will produce really good training. But finally, we need to scale modern slavery coordinators nationally. I know the answers from Home Office and government and policy makers. There is no funds, but we really should try, because in the boroughs that have modern slavery coordinators, survivors are better off. And I acknowledge in here the efforts from Human Trafficking Foundation, the Independent Anti-Slavery Commissioner, and local governmental association who are leading on this. And so, after this very powerful presentation, as I always seem to get in there, I would like now to bring us back to reality. This is the theory. And so I would like us to move into our interview with Mila Mihailov. Mila is a member of our group of experts by experience at the Passage. Mila is an expert, has lived experience of domestic abuse that became sexual exploitation, and then as a result of homelessness as well. Mila, thank you.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for taking the time, and as usual, to share your experience and also your insights, which are absolutely informative and great. Let's focus just on a few questions regarding housing. First, when you reached out for help after your exploitative situation, you went to a housing authority, to your local housing authority. You clearly explained that you were a victim of sexual exploitation. Your perpetrator took your documents away, and he was selling you for sex. You clearly said that to a local authority. Could you share with us what is your experience? What happened next?
Yeah, it's very interesting because the housing authority was the first place I actually contacted after escaping my perpetrator. So they were the first group of people that I actually have seen after being 4 years isolated through my ex-partner who was my perpetrator. And as you mentioned, I did tell them the main thing that I was telling them, that I was isolated for 4 years. He was bringing men and selling me. He took my passport, he took everything. I only had a TV for 4 years. I didn't have phone, internet, and he was making money out of me. Although I said that, and they were the first people that I actually had the chance to talk, the outcome was that I was a victim of domestic abuse. I still don't know why was that outcome. And I'm quite sure that what I say now is the written document. It was signed by me because my solicitor actually requested the documents of the first day that I approached them. And there's a written document where I actually write the story. I believe they asked me to sign it, so it's signed. And it clearly says he was selling me, he isolated me. But because it was I was a survivor of domestic abuse, there's different rules around that. And by the time I entered the UK as a European Union member, and I was on pre-settled status, and that just dominated everything. They said, because you're pre-settled, we do not have a duty of care. So can you just leave, please? So I ended up rough sleeping. And during that rough sleep, I was sexually assaulted. On the last day of my rough sleeping, a very good friend of my perpetrator, saw me in the train station. And I was very lucky. He came to me. Instead of calling my perpetrator, he just came and started to say, oh, you need to go back. You know, he's going to forgive you. But if you don't go back, he's going to kill you. He will harm your mom. He will harm your family. And I just said, oh, I'm leaving London because I had my luggages. But that was like a big risk. He could just call my perpetrator instead of telling me, and then that would be a different story. So later, because of that incident, I just went back. Even they said, you need to leave, you don't have a duty of care. Just because I didn't know anyone else, I came back to the assessment center in Westminster. And I just told them what happened, and I said, what I'm going to do. And I was very lucky that someone from Passage side, who is actually on the housing, just stepped in, and they said, hang on, this sounds like a modern slavery. It doesn't sound like just victim of domestic abuse. And we can provide you with a hotel if that's the case. And they start to listen. They refer me to modern slavery team. I have never heard about modern slavery before in my life, and I'm quite educated. That's why I think a lot of people don't know what it is. I was like, modern slavery, that doesn't sound like me. But here I was, and I was very lucky. Passage stepped in, they arranged a hotel for me, then they engaged me with NRM, and everything changed. The whole story changed. But before that, yeah, that was a little
It was a mess.
It was a mess.
And so that's precisely where I wanted to go into with the second question. So you came to the Passage, we had a NRM. Once you entered the NRM, once you received positive reasonable grounds decision, you chose not to go to a safe house. You chose to receive just outreach support. Why?
Very true. I had very good reasons. When they called me from Salvation Army, I specifically asked them. So as soon as my perpetrator realized that I'm talking with the police give him a visit just to kind of check him out. And he was very aware that I was talking with the police, so he fled the UK to Turkey. So he wasn't in London anymore. So when I was having this conversation, so I told Salvation Army that I would like to stay in London because I'm a trans woman. And they said, no, even he left the country. We have this rule, we have this policy which says if a perpetration happened in London, you can never have a safe house in London. You can have it out of London. My second question, I said, okay, it doesn't need to be London, but it needs to be one of the major cities. Because I'm a trans woman, I hardly have a courage to leave central London, because as soon as I leave and I start to walk, people just stare at me as like I'm an alien. You know what they told me? They said, you can end up in a little village. We would never know. Your support worker would never know till that moment. So you can be in a little town, in a village. There's a lot of reasons why an LGBTQ person wouldn't want that. First of all, as trans woman, I am receiving a trans care, which is lifelong. So I need a doctor who is expert in that. Otherwise, NHS do not accept to prescribe hormones, and you use them all your life. They 3 monthlies. They want a report from your GP about the blood results, and your GP needs to be a specialist in that area. And then there's not many GPs who knows about that. So that was the main reason.
So
and
community
the
is
safety
really
as
important.
well. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, community, it wasn't like, if I think I felt safe and there was a help, I would still go. But why would I move to a place? Like, what about if I'm in a little village and I'm a trans woman and people are like, why she's here? That is a survival thing for me. It's not about missing my community. It's about acceptance or surviving in a community. Not even thinking about community in London. It's more of survival and safety, I would say.
Absolutely. So what on this, seeing your experience, your choices, your insights, based on what you told us, can you just to conclude, is there one thing that you would like to tell to housing officers in local authorities?
Yeah, can I say two things?
You can say two
Very
things.
quickly. Very quickly. Two things, very important. But when you escape your perpetrator as a survivor, you are very likely to end up homeless. So it's probably very likely that the homelessness assessment or homeless professionals will be the first respondent, the first people that you will see or learn about you. So be more curious, more open-minded, to listen and see the red flags. And please do not do the same mistake where you just say, oh, that's domestic violence. No, it's a modern slavery. Second is be a bit more open-minded and curious in terms of, and this is more for policymakers. I engage in 7 different co-productions. So I have Minister of Housing, GLA, Mayor of London, in terms of creating their strategies around homelessness. And when I start to talk about modern slavery, everyone shuts down. I don't know, maybe they don't know about it, or they just find it too intimidating and extra to talk about. But I go to that co-production to talk about my story, to make a change. And I realize the policymakers are very confident to talk about domestic violence, but not modern slavery. They just find it very intimidating. So be open-minded, curious, and be aware that it is real. And we also need policies, and we need positive change in that policies as well. So you do need to listen, even if it's a difficult topic.
Okay. And that is Mila for you. Thank you very much, Mila, as usual. Very insightful interview.
Thanks.
And you're very welcome. And we pass now the session into Q&A for everybody. Thank you. Rose, to you.
Thank you so much for both the research, Julia, and for your contribution, Mila. That was an incredibly important account and narrative of your experience. I've worked in both DV and modern slavery, and I can see exactly where the mistake happened and what when a perpetrator is known, for example, when there is a relationship, it immediately obscures the exploitation element that you experienced, and it becomes a domestic situation, and that is incorrect. That is just a very small part of the much bigger picture. So thank you so much for highlighting that important distinction. I mean, I will open it up to the chat but for questions, but while we wait for the questions to come in, I just wanted to come back to that modern slavery and domestic violence sort of overlap. And I believe in your report, Julia, you emphasize the need for training for local authorities, training for safe house providers. I wondered if you wanted to speak more on what it was that you found, maybe why this lack of awareness between what is domestic violence and what is modern slavery. What came out of your research, especially speaking to people from local authority and people who work in safe houses, just to speak more on what was the core message that came across to you, and maybe some recommendations on how to fix this.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you, Mila. Yes, indeed. So it's what we call in the sector, as you all know, the lottery ticket. It's really clear that in local authorities that have modern slavery coordinators, training is delivered, and really good training. There's more and more organizations working with survivors. Human Trafficking Foundation provide training delivered by survivors. But the problem is that these are just in certain places, just in certain regions, and that's why central government should be far more proactive. By now, it's even reactive, by owning this training framework, by delivering this training to all local authorities. So the local authorities who don't have modern slavery coordinators will be always on the back a little bit. And mind you, local authorities are really interested in this issue. They ask me for training, and I try to, and we all, the anti-slavery sector, we try to see who is the best organization to deliver training in person in that place. This could all be one thing, one framework, all the same for everybody. And also evaluation is really, really important, because we can deliver training here and there and do our best as we can, as we all do in the anti-slavery sector, and we do our own evaluation as well, but we need a national evaluation. We need to involve more survivors in training, and then evaluate, see how people took it in, see 1 year after, do they still remember the training? Do they need a refresher session? So it's a whole kind of activity. It would be a whole activity to do, and at least everybody would, because I really think local authorities are interested in this issue. It's just the lack of opportunity to learn about it, and I think the Home Office should facilitate that.
Absolutely. Thank you. I have received a question. I think, especially with your experience, Mila, you mentioned your a friend of your perpetrator seeing you, and that moment where it could have gone completely different if that friend had spoken to your perpetrator instead of speaking to you. And I think that that tension in that moment is a perfect example of the risk of re-traumatization. I wondered, in that vein, if either yourself, Mila, or Julia, you could speak to how exactly homelessness can lead to vulnerability of re-exploitation outside of just that experience. That's something that came up in your research, and I wondered if you wanted to explain, just in case people aren't aware, that how that link actually works.
Yes, well, I think that homelessness is definitely a vulnerability to modern slavery, and the driver even, because people sleeping rough or with unstable housing will accept any offer of housing or a roof over your head. Is highly traumatizing to sleep rough, and people will do everything not to sleep rough. And I would like in here, I think it's really important to give the word to Mila, because precisely when Mila was sleeping rough in Victoria, someone asked you to come with them.
Just to clarify two things. It was just a couple of days, and my perpetrator was actively looking for me. And it was actually the housing assessment team who advised me to go to Victoria train station because it was very cold. Victoria train station is one of the major hubs. Even if you live in Hackney or Richmond, that's where you came from. That's where it connects. So being rough sleeping there, waiting during the morning there, just put me in a high risk. I think, just for your question, if I wouldn't be here now, just that's the clear answer, if he just called my perpetrator. On the other hand, if someone give me a housing, that risk wouldn't be there. So it was clear as day that they put me in an extremely high risk by saying, we do not have a duty of care. We advise you to go to Victoria train station because there's a transport police, it's safer, but it's also the main hub. I think people forget, and you were very right. I think everyone was thinking he is your ex-partner. They wouldn't see him as a perpetrator. No, I was a big asset for him. He will do anything to get me back. Like 4 years, he used me. But I think people focused on before, which was 7 years we were together. He was my partner before that. And they would just think, oh, you know, that's domestic abuse, and you're very right. So there is a lot of links there. If someone provided me with a hotel, this was like the sentences on the opening of a presentation, empty place, no bed, no chair. I would be very happy to take it. But I was outside in the middle of the, you know, Victoria train station where everyone is passing, and that's how he saw me.
And you also, do you remember that you also said that a man offered you and the other girl you were with?
Yeah. So what happened there?
Survival sex going?
Exactly. So you end up sitting with people similar to you. So I end up sitting together with homeless women. So people will immediately know that we are homeless just looking at us. Homeless man comes together. So there was a guy who came and pretend to be homeless. He said, I'm homeless as well. Oh, I said, great, you know, that's like my second day, you know, from. And he was like, oh, I have tips where to go, where to. And then the conversation started to become a bit different, where he started to say he has a place in Hackney, and he was homeless in Victoria because he didn't have a home in Victoria, but he had a house. I said, that's not homeless. You can't go to any, you know, like suburb and say I'm homeless because I don't have a home here. So I immediately know something was wrong. Then as soon as he realized I'm not getting the story, second person appeared. I didn't realize I was a second person. So they start to tell me, oh, you can make a lot of money. You need to come with us. You don't need to be homeless. So because I was already a victim or survivor of modern slavery, I said, no. But interestingly, the woman next to me just said, oh, if they offered me that, I would go. So this is the risks. Because I was already a survivor, I know that I'm not going to get a great life or whatever they're talking. But the woman next to me thought it was very attractive offer. And if it was her, she probably would just walk away with them, and probably we will never see her. So these are the risks when you leave women vulnerable, sleeping rough, that can look very attractive if a man comes and offers them a money, place to stay. He said, it's a beautiful apartment. I don't need to be homeless. I will make a lot of money. That's the risks.
Better explained, we can't.
It's very true. That was a fantastic example. It's a case study, really. Thank you so much for sharing that. I see we have some great questions coming in the chat, and I'm conscious of time, so I will prioritize a few of them. There's a question from Millie who says, as outreach rough sleeper support teams, what kind of questions should we include in our initial assessments to try and establish if a client might be a victim of modern slavery, even if they themselves are not aware of what modern slavery is? And they say because often our initial assessments are often brief and take place on the streets. So this would be a very appreciative insight into how to include this. I think that's a fantastic question, but I'll hand that over to you both.
Yeah, well, you know, you should never, of course, should never ask, are you a victim of modern slavery or human trafficking or exploitation? Especially modern slavery doesn't touch people, doesn't say anything. It's also a very traumatizing question, is a really bang. So what we do generally, and that's what we include at the training, at the passage, is first is, do you have your ID? If you don't have your ID, why not? Does someone have your documents? You know, are you okay? Tell me a little bit about you. So you don't have your documents. Do you have access to benefits? Does someone control your benefits, actually? Little questions around it. Of course, you can get into the question really is, are you safe? Do you feel safe? I think that would be the most direct, that the person will tell you, I don't feel safe now, is someone being forcing you to do something against your will. I think that really avoiding the modern slavery, human trafficking, that is a conversation for later on. First of all, is the safety of the person. Are you okay? Do you feel safe? If not, why not? Because then I tend to suggest that to divide it in 3 open questions. How did you get here? What has happened? And how did you get out of this situation? Really open questions. How did you get that job? But, you know, as an outreach, directly to this outreach team who is asking the question, is really, I think it's about safety. And someone has access to your account, someone has access to the benefits, something like that. Would you like to add something?
I can't agree more. It's interesting that in my case, it worked on against me, because they were saying, okay, you have been in UK for 4.5 years and you didn't work. I said he was selling what was isolated, so I can't work. But they were like, why you didn't apply for a universal credit? And I was like, because I was locked in a room. Like, I didn't need universal credit because I'm locked. I don't have this option to ask for. So there was questions, but they weren't clever about the answers, although I was very clear that he was selling me. But again, they were like, okay, if you had a universal credit, we could have a duty of care just because we could relate them together. But because you never applied for universal credit, you never worked and paid tax, that's why we do not have a duty of care. And that was like, but I said, so just to make it a bit clear, I was a director in HSBC before I came to UK. So I had a HR role, very senior HR role. I'm an engineer, I have 3 masters. So I came here to work, but it just didn't happen. And I was just telling me, do you think I would even need universal credit if I wasn't isolated and he wasn't selling me? This is my job, this is what I was doing. But they just, and I think again, Rose, this is a very important thing. Because he was my partner before, they will keep resetting to domestic abuse and not modern slavery. And I think that's one of the biggest problems. And one of the things which is very important is people should realize the perpetrators in modern slavery are generally the closest people to you. This is a fact. You know, there's a percentages there. So it's very likely that it's your ex-partner or your brother or your father exploiting you. But I think this is when it becomes more confused and people think about domestic abuse.
Absolutely. And I think you touched on it earlier in your testimony almost, that you wanted the person to be open-minded, curious. And that's where I think the questions that you were bringing up, Julia, sort of highlight that. It's, well, if you don't have that, if not, why not? Who has it? You were stuck in a place. Well, what was happening in that place? You know, those are those follow-on questions that can really make a difference. Being almost intellectually curious of the story that someone has come to you can make or break whether that situation is something like domestic violence or modern slavery.
Rose, you will be also very surprised how many people don't know. As a policymakers, like as I said, I'm in 7 different co-productions. You will be surprised how many policymakers don't know what modern slavery exactly is. They don't know when you say human trafficking, sexual exploitation. That was another discussion between me and Julia. Maybe to find a way to inform the government, maybe to change the wording. Terms. Modern slavery is something that you will be surprised that a lot of people in health industry, they don't really know about it. As soon as you relate it with human trafficking, exploitation, oh, they said yes. But it's just not a term that a lot of people knew. And they expect when there's a homelessness assessment, the person to know it. Unfortunately, they don't know it sometimes. They know trafficking and exploitation, But modern slavery, surprisingly, they don't know. I think in Passage we are very lucky because we have a team, dedicated team. We have Julia, we have like, navigators, which I used as well when I escaped. So they're quite knowledgeable. But if you go to different charities, they don't know, or different council definitely, I think, are lacking that knowledge, unfortunately. Even in my policy making co-production discussions, I need to explain sometimes what it means, and you just kind of think these people are senior policymakers, but because modern slavery is not their expertise, they make their senior for housing policies, but not in that. So it's a food for thought.
That's where two sectors have to work more together.
And would you say that, because I'm looking at a question that came from Amy, it says, I believe that in reviewing the NRM system, one option could be considered as making decisions at the local authority level. If this were done, do you feel this would help the housing issues you have raised, including identification and access to housing? And I wonder if that's sort of, whether in your experience, are local authorities aware of, has that awareness of modern slavery and human trafficking been shown in your conversations with local authorities, or whether you think that maybe going directly on a local authority decision level, whether that would be a way of solving this divide?
Well, I'm not quite sure, and I don't have the magic answer either. It would be interesting to pilot it like as we are doing for children. It would be very interesting to pilot it with adults. I'm not quite sure if she should be dependent on the local authorities. On one side, yes, because local authorities know their areas, know the type of crimes. It will be better for them to know, understand the situation and the survivors in their borough. But on the other side, I'm a bit afraid that it will be again that lottery ticket that is not centralized information and support, and that would depend again on the motivation of professionals rather than national statutory guidances. So I am very divided on that one. I would not want to give a formal answer like that. Definitely yes for piloting it. But don't know. Also, for the local authorities to take, I think safeguarding should be far more involved in modern slavery cases. We are pretty lucky in Westminster. They are. We work with a safeguarding team and with a rough sleeping team. This doesn't happen everywhere, but this has to be accompanied with funds. We cannot just devolve everything to local authorities with no funds at all, because they have already hard times as it is. So we think we have to put all of that on the table and really analyze and do a benefits cost analysis, really, to see what would work better.
Brilliant, thank you, Julia. I can see the time, but I think we have time for a few more questions. So I see a question from Emma that firstly thanks you both, and that the work is very insightful. But regarding the availability of safe houses in London, do you think this is due to simple availability of housing, or do you think there are other drivers for this?
I think there are other drivers for it that are beyond my understanding, as they are going, as we speak, going on and on and on. We are told that a very important safe house service provider is closing a key safe house in London. We are also told that another subcontractor is ending its work in June. So I'm very worried where the anti-slavery sector is going. I don't think we have enough support and understanding from the other departments in the Home Office and other ministries. And so, to my knowledge, there were actually very contradiction. There were beds in London, and they were empty. Now, I'm not part of these organizations or the internal decisions in any way. So, but I am very curious to understand why, with such a demand for bedding in London and key safe houses closing. And of course, we're going to go back to budgets and fundings and stuff. But there is, yes, it's a strange one. What is going on? As for staying in London, as a homeless charity, we know very well there is a complete lack of housing, affordable housing, lack of social housing in London. It's absolutely incredible. It's a fight for everybody, not only victims of modern slavery or domestic violence, but absolutely everyone. And yes, and we do need solutions that are just not coming. But again, I don't have magic solutions in my pocket.
Thank you. No, I don't think anybody expects a magic wand to fix all of this.
I wish I had.
Yes. I have a question regarding your research highlights, because it highlights the structural and legal barriers within the housing system. So if you had to prioritize one area for immediate policy reform, which would you think would have the greatest impact on reducing homelessness risk among survivors?
Well, we did put the recommendations by order. Kind of, there is an importance for that, but I think that amending Chapter 25 of the Homelessness Reduction Code of Guidance is very, very important, is doable, is being done, actually, which is amazing. And I think that would clarify the powers and the duties of local authorities, even if people is and receiving government support. And that's why it was number one. I think that modern slavery coordinators in every local authority would be the magic wand, really would. But I understand there's no way. And then, of course, training is going, but we are delivering, we are doing the anti-slavery sector and now the homelessness sector. We are covering the patches. We need to do more. But I think that clarifying the guidance, both for homelessness and modern slavery, would be a really good step for local authorities.
Thank you so much, Julia. I have one more question that I really wanted to ask you. It's about the policy brief on the cohort of no NRMs. Your brief highlights a mistrust of statutory systems as a key reason why survivors decline to enter the NRM. So I wondered, and this question is both for you and Mila, what do you think it would take to genuinely rebuild that trust rather than simply adapt processes around it?
Well, to mention the elephant in the room, really, authorities need to be kinder to start with. I've seen many NRM referrals by UKVI who are absolutely disgraceful, not trauma-informed in any way. You could just reading it, you could see that the officer had absolutely no interest whatsoever by the person in front of them. And this is asylum seekers, and that's the topic that is the elephant in the room, isn't it? Is immigration. For this cohort, for survivors of modern slavery who are foreign nationals, it's very hard to trust authorities. Anyway, you know, I'm a legal migrant in here. I promise you the passage pays me. I have a signed contract. I can leave when I want. And if someone would tell me all your information is going to go now to the Home Office, even I would be like, whoa, what? So imagine survivors who have an experience already of distrust of police and other authorities. That is very scary to hear, especially because you know and you feel as a migrant, as a foreigner myself, you feel the animosity, you feel the hostility. So that stops people coming in. So I think it's be kinder to start with. Authorities should be kinder, should definitely be more trauma informed, should absolutely be trained not to ask the questions as they are written in the NRM referral, but ask them in a trauma informed way. That would help. Also, if first responders, that I mean local authorities, are not trained in modern slavery, how do you expect, even if local authorities don't understand what is modern slavery, how do you expect survivors will understand what is the national referral mechanism?
Can I just add something?
Absolutely.
I will have a completely different view on Julia's view. I think the NRM doesn't serve if you have a legal status. Just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
If I had a choice today, if I would go to NRM or not, 2 years ago, I'm telling my story 100 times during NRM, I get absolutely nothing out of it. Not that weekly thing, £26 or something that they pay. They don't accept back payment, but I have the positive conclusion that everything is positive. So as soon as I get the conclusion, they stop the whole that £26 as well, which I received, I believe, only for 5 weeks recently. So I think if you have an immigration needs, it may help you at least to stay. But if you are British, if you are European Union member, it wouldn't help you. So for me, I would say the whole NRM need to be revamped to consider UK nationals and European Union nationals, considering they are the major part of survivors or victims of modern slavery.
Brilliant. Well, that's a fantastic way to wrap up this session. So a huge thank you again to both you, Julia, and Mila, for your time today, but especially for your contributions in this piece of research. I said it before and I'll say it again. It was a pleasure working with you, and I think it's a fantastic contribution to this research area. I wish you all a wonderful afternoon. Hopefully it's sunny wherever you are, and well, we'll see you at the next one.